This channel claims that all history, or almost all history, is fabricated. All of our history is a fabrication. If you seriously think about whether such a story is actually true, you will feel as if you were living a nightmare, just like I did. However, most of you have already understood that the realization and consideration that all of this history is a lie and fabrication is a truly nightmarish truth. The goal that I have currently set as the name of this channel, Breaking Through the Matrix, is exactly the image of waking up from this nightmare. However, it is a truism that in order to wake up from this nightmare, we must first become aware of it and recognize it. Yes, we need to see through these lies and fabrications one after another in order to wake up from this nightmare. In order to break through the matrix, we must see through the history of lies and fabrications. I have learned on this channel that various things, not just history, but all things are lies and fabrications. I'm sure you are all convinced of the depth of that lie, especially after the events that began in 2020. I just arrived in Japan the other day, and I'm still in Japan, where the local Japanese and even the tourists from China, who seem to be less brainwashed than in Japan, stubbornly believe in that brainwashing mask. I was surprised to see so many people playing the role of brainwashed masked people. Our world is full of lies and fabricated information, and these lies and fabricated information are spread out in order to manipulate us into doing what they want. The number of people who are aware of this has increased significantly since the events of 2020 began, but even so, in Japan, where there are a maximum number of brainwashed people, the majority are still at the same level of awareness as masked, brainwashed people. In such a situation, you have at least proven for yourself that you are not at the level of being brainwashed by mass. And the fact that you have reached this channel and are still continuing to watch my channel means that many viewers are convinced that there are lies in history, or that most of it is lies and fabrications. These are people who understand. However, I would like to clearly state here an important historical secret that you are probably not aware of. This means that history is essentially nothing but a fabrication. In other words, the fact that history has been fabricated is not an abnormality. It is a normal thing. Many of us must be under the impression that the original form of history is to record the truth. However, it is completely impossible for history, official history, to record the truth. The only thing that can be done is to record what people and forces in power think are important at the time and make it into history. And the people in power in this world are the forces that manipulate this world to a certain extent as they wish. They manipulate the world as they wish, dramatically dramatize the results and report them in the mass media, and then write down their dramatized scenarios as history. Those in power organize events and incidents to suit their needs, and ordinary people only passively participate and cooperate in the events and incidents. The situation is reported as a special event in the media, such as newspapers, magazines, and television, in a way that allows those in power to be manipulated as they wish. Then scholars summarize these situations according to the will of those in power, further dramatize them, and compile them into textbooks. According to the textbook, historical events of fabrication and manipulation are taught in schools, and brainwashing education is carried out. As you can see, events and incidents are fabricated according to the will of people in power or groups. They are reported in the mass media according to the will of those in power, and children are taught in schools according to the will of those in power. It is a beautiful cycle of brainwashing. This situation is not only true in modern times, but also before the war, and is thought to have been the same in the Meiji era as well. Powerful people and powerful groups plan, carry out, or fabricate events and incidents, report them in the mass media as they like, and finally compile them into history. When that happens, there will be no events that are not fabrications and no history that is not fabrications. I'm sure it sounds strange to most of you watching this video, but it can be considered that there is no history that is not fabricated. Even if history is based on actual events, it is still nothing more than a derivative work of actual events. How did the official media report on the events that occurred in 2020? When you consider that, the situation becomes even clearer. A group of people in power held an event, and the official media spread information about the event according to the interpretation intended by the group in power. And when this event may end up in textbooks in a few years, it will be treated as a historical fact, as if it really happened as they intended. This same mechanism applies to almost all events that have occurred in the past. Every incident. Therefore, writing history can only be fabricated. So sometimes when viewers of this channel leave completely nonsensical comments in the comments section, and you can see that they are completely nonsensical. I hope that someday the Vatican Library will be open to the public and the true history will be revealed. Do you understand that such hope itself is nonsense? Yes, even if there really is a true history book held in the Vatican Library, there is a zero chance that the history book is true. This is because the history books were definitely compiled based on the intentions of those in power, and it is safe to say that they were fabricated by those in power. From this perspective, history is a fabrication, and it is safe to say that modern history, current events, and even what is shown on television are all fabrications. Yes, you all understand somewhere in your heart that the elections that are being cast and counted today, as you all know, are a fabrication manipulated by someone's intentions. The results of this election will eventually be well reported by the media controlled by the powerful groups and will eventually be included in textbooks as historical fact by the scholars who are their agents. Moreover, our history is that of a very new civilization that suddenly began after the mid-19th century. The reason why it started in the mid-19th century is because it is believed that in the 19th century, in the first half of the 1800s, probably around 1812, a catastrophic disaster or war of extermination occurred that destroyed civilization and spread throughout the world. Its traces are now clearly visible in the many buildings still in use around the world, whose windows and entrances are buried underground. The windows and entrance of the building, which is said to have been built in the 1700s, are buried underground. If these buildings were really built in the 1700s, then a major disaster occurred that caused the collapse of civilization, and as a result, a layer of clay buried the buildings by 5 to 8 meters. As I have told you about our history, even the history of the modern 21st century after 2020 is currently in progress, with the media and scholars working together to create a fabricated history. This is not a story where someone is adding color and dramatizing it because it will be advantageous to someone, but a group of people who make up fabricated incidents and even take people's lives as a result of the incident. They are manipulating information in the exact opposite way as if they were saving the world. It's all about a fabricated and made-up incident, and the people who took part in it become very rich and powerful, and then they are praised on TV and in magazines, and eventually treated as heroes who can be seen in textbooks. Is planned. In our civilization, such fabrications, lies, and malicious reporting and history editing have been repeated over and over again, and this is the true state of history. Therefore, the information written in textbooks and various books is highly accurate and is either bullshit or fabrication. The world before the 19th century reset and disappeared just before the Meiji era, and our new civilization began around the Meiji era. Our civilization is a lying civilization characterized by false flag operations and fabricated histories that control the general public through lies and fabrications. It has become clear that this lying civilization is hiding the history of a previous civilization that predates the 19th century. Are there any facts or truth in historical accounts before the 19th century? Unfortunately, there is nothing that can prove the existence of even the heroes of recent Japanese history that we know, such as Tokugawa Ieyasu, Oda Nobunaga, and Toyotomi Hideyoshi. I urge everyone to carefully investigate whether there is any proof of the existence of these people. A quick search revealed that their existence was only supported by hearsay and diaries written by close aides of unknown affiliation. Documents, signatures, family trees, and portraits can all be forged and appear to have been created recently. If you look at the exhibits in these museums with a skeptical eye, you will be convinced that there is no basis for rejecting accusations of fabrication. On the other hand, nothing remains of the castles, ditches, and waterways that they are said to have built, including their blueprints, estimates, and supplier lists, as well as the family lines, documentary evidence, and goods of the people who were involved in them. There is no such thing. Official history says that these castles, ditches, and canals were built by hand, without electricity or iron machinery. But as you can see, it is impossible to recreate them even with today's technology. And not only in Japan, but all over the world, buildings and infrastructure built on medieval technology, which are at an inferior level of civilization, have become the centerpiece of tourist trips in various places. It means that we, and humanity as a whole, implicitly accept that the technology of past eras is superior. The difference is obvious. Even though medieval construction techniques and civilization levels were clearly superior, official history says that they were handmade and built by people from a culture inferior to our own. This fact itself clearly shows that history is only fabricated to suit the interests of powerful groups. Until yesterday, I had been traveling for about a week, mainly in the Okhotsk region of Hokkaido, where I was born and raised in Abashiri, Shirotoko, and Kawayu. I have always had certain questions about the history of this area. This land used to be home to many Ainu people, and Japanese people like us settled there after the Meiji period and took away the land from the Ainu people to live on. However, even though I have lived in a rural area of the Okhotsk region in eastern Hokkaido for some time, I have never heard of a single Ainu child in an elementary school in a village with about 300 students. After that, I went to high school in Abashiri, which is considered one of the central cities in the Okhotsk region, with a population of about 40,000 people. But I never heard of a single person who was of Ainu descent. Certainly, if you go to souvenir shops in Kawayu or Akan, you will find people who look like Ainu people, but there are very few of them. During this trip, when I stopped by a souvenir shop in the sandbath of Kawayu Onsen, I talked to an old man who was selling wooden carvings, and I learned that until a few years ago, I knew there was a person who had the same blood as that, but he is no longer with us. I also heard that there are still people in Akan. However, when I was visiting a souvenir shop in Akan about 10 years ago, I heard that the people making the wood carvings there were people who had immigrated from Honshu, mainland of Japan. This is not to say that there are no people called Ainu, but the number is unnaturally small. As I gave the examples of Tokugawa Ieyasu and Oda Nobunaga, and as I have explained many times in this video, the historical stories of the Jomon and Yayoi periods are clear fabrications. Both the Sengoku period and the Jomon period are fabrications. In other words, the idea that Japan existed before the 1700s and had a history as we know it can almost certainly be considered a fabrication. In this video, we will not explain why all history before the 1700s is a lie. Instead of focusing on that part, if they are all fabrications, then what was our current world? This is a consideration from that perspective. If Japan's history is a lie, we tend to think that the history of Ainu-based Hokkaido and Tohoku is the truth. However, the history of the Ainu is often unrealistic, and there is almost no physical evidence. As I mentioned earlier, even though I have lived in Hokkaido for many years, I rarely meet people who have Ainu blood. If you look at the history of the Ainu, there are records that there was a war with the Japanese people during Japan's Sengoku period before the 1800s, but as I said earlier, this Sengoku period itself was fabricated. The Ainu people are said to have a history of war, but the Ainu people themselves are hardly recognizable. I actually live in Hokkaido and feel that way. The question then becomes, what exactly were the Ainu people who appeared in Hokkaido and the Tohoku region after the 19th century? That's what it means. Before that, there is a culture of fabrication that is the basis for thinking that the history of the Ainu is fabricated, just like the history of Japan. This contradicts the understanding that the Ainu people coexisted with nature and were a society centered on hunting and gathering, and the fact that they still inherited their traditional costumes and call themselves Ainu culture. The same is true for Japanese kimonos, but when it comes to making clothes, there is no way to make them in a culture of hunting and gathering. On the contrary, even in the Heian period, when agriculture was the main focus and there was no factory-based production industry, there was no way clothing could be made. This is because to make cloth, you need thread, and to make thread and cloth, you need a machine to make it. In order to apply Ainu-specific embroidery to the cloth, a needle is required, and this needle cannot be substituted with fish bone or animal bone. Even obsidian cannot be substituted. If you wanted to use it as a substitute, how could you make a needle hole in hard stone or bone to thread the thread through? Yes, you need a strong metal cutting tool. In order to make metal tools, iron and iron processing technology are required, which cannot be achieved by hand. It requires the knowledge, technology, and labor to mine large amounts of iron ore in tons, and it also requires the technology and factories to mine it, put it in a furnace, and melt it. They will also require electricity to operate properly. Only with such an industrial base can thread production, fabric processing, and manual embroidery work become possible. Such a thing could not have existed not only in the Ainu people, who lived their lives mainly by hunting and gathering, but also in Japan during the Heian and Warring States periods. In other words, the cultures of historical past times that we are taught are pure lies and low-level fabrications. Therefore, many of the costumes and decorations that are now said to be Ainu cultural embroidery or Ainu national costumes are considered to be creations that appeared around the Meiji period. The same goes for Japanese kimonos. And although these are too elaborate to be called fabrications, it would be more accurate to say that Japan's kimono culture and Ainu embroidery culture are creations that appeared around the 19th century rather than fabrications. The creation of these cultures is something that cannot be created by beings with low intelligence, like us, who cannot see through the blatant fabrications of the Edo period, Sengoku period, Heian period, and Ainu culture. But not, yes, it is thought that these creatures were created and left behind around the Meiji period by intelligent beings on a different level who were superior in intelligence to us and possessed various types of knowledge. Both Ainu culture and Japanese culture. It is said that many place names in Hokkaido and Tohoku are derived from the Ainu language. These place names are thought to have been given by the creators of Ainu culture and the Ainu language sometime in the 19th century. Hokkaido and Tohoku are also called Ezo and are set apart from Wajin and Japanese people. This is the existence of aliens or people from another dimension who were creating human resources in Hokkaido, Tohoku, Sakhalin, the four northern islands, and the Russian Far East. It's possible that it was something else. However, in Hokkaido, unlike Honshu, there are no old folk houses, and almost no buildings or ancient tombs remain. Instead, there are vast plains that can't be seen on Honshu, and there are incredible landscapes left. This means that Honshu was not as completely destroyed as Hokkaido in Siberia, but on the contrary, Hokkaido and Siberia were completely destroyed and became even more extremely cold places. However, even in Hokkaido, there seem to be some relics from previous civilizations left behind. Railway tunnels made of bricks and steam locomotives in Asahikawa and Kamikutan. A stone block-style building that can sometimes be seen near Nika Whiskey, Asahikawa, and Abashiri. Abashiri Prison's unbalanced main gate that looks like it's buried, and the charred and buried structures surrounding it. The ground of stone blocks visible at the bottom of Lake Kushiro. There is a similar stone corridor that connects Sakhalin to the continent, a railway tunnel that penetrates the mountain, which can also be seen in Shirtoko, but it's already blocked. What these findings suggest is that some kind of pre-civilization ruins exist in Hokkaido as well. However, Hokkaido, like Siberia, has been completely destroyed, making it difficult to find any traces of that civilization. Instead, it is a vast plain, a wetland with many ponds, swamps, and lakes, as if some kind of attack had occurred or some cataclysm had occurred, like something erupting from beneath the ground. It probably takes place in the early 1800s. The traces of this rock are clearly left in this Futrok rock in Abashiri, which is charred black. The huge rock at the Utoro fishing port in Shirtoko and the surrounding rocks also suggest that some kind of destruction occurred. The Sea of Okhotsk is also incredibly rough. The roughness of this sea is as if the aliens and angels who created the Ainu people were deceived and destroyed by the Yahweh type who ruled Japan, and their souls were raging. I felt that. In various parts of Honshu, these raging deities have been carefully sealed off with shrines and torii gates, and even today they continue to use their human egos to carry out their sorcery. On the other hand, I believe that Hokkaido did not have the human resources to thwart the raging gods, nor were they able to bring in excellent sorcerers. This is probably because the weather conditions in Hokkaido, especially in eastern Hokkaido, were extremely bad, and famous sorcerers refused to visit this area. The extremely harsh and poor weather resulted in Japan rejecting magical and economic control from the mainland, And even now it feels like the raging deity that is still boiling over, the raging deity that Yahweh subdued in the early 1800s, is raging in eastern Hokkaido. And with the number 123, I was born in the northeastern part of the world, in the northeastern part of Japan, further northeastern Hokkaido, and lived there until I was 18 years old. This northeastern land is a place called Kimon. On this trip to Hokkaido, I traveled with the intention of liberating the souls trapped in this demon gate, the Northeast. But was this soul really liberated?
未来へと紡いでく人をより集めて戻し引き裂いた嘘だらけの地平線よ愛せ許すな今を生きてる美しい月の音波の輝きさえ惑わしの世界の飾りでしかないと真実を求めてさまよい歩く道見知らぬ誰かたちが笑いかけて消えるどこまで行けばたどり着けるのあがき苦しみ抜いて自分を壊せすべて疑えと光はささやくけど足の指に食い込む砂を取り払って歩く新世界本物を見抜いてみせるララルララル我を導け魂心体ここにある現実闇に埋もれ眠るは隠された口実差し出された甘い罠を一つ一つ捨ててわずかに見える信じる心を力に変え向かうこの丘の向こう壁の彼方必ず見えてくる Flat-Earth ナイル川を照らす太陽ララルララル我を悟れと人と人よどう見せたい何を隠してごまかす最新であれ自由であれ恐れすら壊してこの海の向こう空の彼方伏せられた歴史と見えぬ未来本物を見抜いてみせるララルララル我を導けこの山の向こう